You've been outsmarted your entire life, and you didn't even know it. Every time you told the truth, when a lie would have protected you. Every time you showed your hand, when silence would have won the game. Every time you trusted someone who was already 3 moves ahead of you, you lost. Not because you're stupid, not because you're weak, but because nobody ever taught you how the game actually works. Look around you. The people getting promoted at your job aren't the hardest workers. The people winning in relationships aren't the nicest ones. The people commanding respect in every room they walk into aren't the loudest, the tallest, or the most talented. They're the ones who understand something you don't. They understand that intelligence without strategy is just wasted potential. They understand that kindness without boundaries is an invitation to be destroyed. They understand that the world doesn't reward good intentions, it rewards smart execution. And here's what should terrify you. The people who manipulate you, the ones who take advantage of your honesty, who exploit your loyalty, who smile in your face while positioning themselves above you, they're not smarter than you. They just learned the rules of a game you didn't even know you were playing. You've been playing checkers in a chess world. You've been showing up to a sword fight with a handshake. And every scar you carry, every betrayal that still stings, every moment you replay at 3 in the morning, wondering why you weren't enough. That's the cost of being dangerously uninformed in a world that punishes the naive. That ends today. 500 years ago, a man named Niccolò Machiavelli sat in exile, stripped of his power, betrayed by the very people he served, and instead of breaking, he did something that changed human history forever. He wrote down the brutal, unfiltered truth about how power really works. Not how it should work, not how we wish it worked, how it actually works. And those truths are so dangerous, so uncomfortably accurate, that governments banned his book, churches condemned it, and people still whisper his name like it's a curse word. But here's the thing, Machiavelli didn't write for the powerful. He wrote for the people who were tired of being powerless. Today, I'm going to share with you 8 ruthless lessons drawn from Machiavelli's philosophy that will fundamentally rewire how you think, how you move, and how you protect yourself. These aren't tricks. These aren't motivational bumper stickers. These are psychological weapons that, once you understand them, will make you the most dangerous person in any room you walk into. Not dangerous because you're violent, dangerous because you're aware, dangerous because nobody can manipulate what they can't predict, dangerous because you finally see the board clearly. Now, let me be direct with you. I'm not telling you to become evil. I'm not telling you to manipulate innocent people or destroy relationships for sport. What I am telling you is that being strategically intelligent is not the same as being cruel. You can be a good person and still refuse to be a fool. You can have a kind heart and still have an unbreakable mind. This isn't about becoming a villain. This is about making sure you never become a victim again. Now, before we dive in, I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. I see the game now. Say it like you mean it, because by the end of this video, you will. Let's begin. Number 1. Stop announcing your moves. This might be the single most expensive mistake intelligent people make. You get excited about a plan, a new business idea, a career move, a decision to cut someone off, a goal that finally feels real, and the first thing you do is tell someone. You share it at dinner. You post about it. You confide in a friend. And you don't realize that the moment those words leave your mouth, you've handed ammunition to everyone around you. Not because everyone is your enemy, but because not everyone is your ally. And you rarely know the difference until it's too late. Think about it. When you announce your plans, you invite opinions you didn't ask for. You invite doubt from people who have never built anything. You invite jealousy from people who smile at your face, but quietly hope you fail. Worse, you give potential opponents a roadmap. You show them exactly where you're headed, which means they can position themselves to block you, undercut you, or beat you there. You've turned your strategy into a public event, and then you wonder why things fall apart before they even start. Machiavelli once said, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are." That line is 5 centuries old, and it's still the most relevant piece of advice you'll hear this year. What Machiavelli understood is that your greatest advantage in any situation is the gap between what people think you're doing and what you're actually doing. The moment you close that gap, the moment you make your inner world visible to the outer world, you lose leverage, you lose surprise, you lose power. Here's what this looks like in real life. You're at work and you've been quietly applying for a better position at a competing company. You're close to getting the offer. But one night, over drinks with a coworker you think you trust, you let it slip. "I'm probably leaving soon," you say with a grin. 2 days later, your manager knows. Suddenly, your projects are being reassigned. You're being left out of meetings. The offer hasn't come through yet, and now you're in a worse position than when you started. Not because you made a bad move, but because you announced a good one too early. Most people broadcast their intentions because it feels good. The validation of sharing a plan almost feels as satisfying as executing it. That's a psychological trap called substitution. Your brain rewards you for talking about the goal as if you've already achieved it, which actually decreases your motivation to follow through. The powerful understand this. They stay silent not because they have nothing to say, but because their silence is the strategy. They let results speak. They let the outcome announce itself. By the time anyone realizes what happened, it's already done. The old you announced plans to feel important. The new you executes in silence and lets success make the noise. From this moment forward, treat your plans like classified information. Share them only with people who have proven, through action, not words, that they deserve access to your inner world. Drop this affirmation in the comments. Silence is my weapon. Number 2. Learn to be comfortable being misunderstood. This one is going to hit different because it attacks one of the deepest needs hardwired into the human brain, the need to be understood. From the time you were a child, you've been trained to explain yourself. Explain why you made that choice. Explain why you're upset. Explain why you're leaving. Explain, justify, defend, over and over until you've internalized a devastating belief that your actions are only valid if other people understand them. Here's the brutal truth. The need to be understood is one of the most exploitable weaknesses a person can have. The moment someone realizes you can't tolerate being misunderstood, they own you. All they have to do is misrepresent you, question your motives, twist your words, and you'll come running back to explain, to defend, to prove yourself, and every time you do, you hand them your power on a silver platter. You've turned yourself into a defendant in a court you never agreed to enter, being judged by people who were never qualified to hold the gavel. Machiavelli once said, "Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, for everyone can see but few can feel." What he meant is that people will always judge you based on appearance, on perception, on the surface-level story they've constructed in their heads. And no amount of explaining will change that, because they're not interested in understanding you. They're interested in the version of you that fits their narrative. You can spend your entire life trying to correct people's perceptions of you, or you can accept a liberating truth. Their perception is their problem, not yours. Let me paint this clearly. You set a boundary with a family member. You stop showing up to events where you're disrespected. You stop lending money to a relative who never pays you back. And suddenly, you're the villain. You're cold. You're changed. They talk about you at gatherings you're not at. And the old you, the version of you that was addicted to being understood, would have broken. You would have called, explained, maybe even apologized for having standards. You would have sacrificed your peace just to manage their perception of you. The powerful version of you does something radically different. Nothing. You let them talk. You let them misunderstand. You let them build whatever story they want, because you know something they don't. Their opinion doesn't change your reality. It only reveals their character. The discomfort of being misunderstood is temporary. The damage of abandoning your boundaries to chase approval is permanent. There's a psychological principle at work here called the spotlight effect. It's the cognitive bias that makes you dramatically overestimate how much other people are thinking about you. The truth is, most people are too consumed with their own lives to maintain a detailed narrative about yours. That story you think they're telling about you? It's a passing thought between their own problems. You're giving their opinions power they don't actually have. Here's what this looks like in practice. When someone misunderstands your motives, you don't correct them. When someone questions your silence, you don't fill it with justification. When someone demands an explanation for your boundaries, you offer them a simple, devastating response. Nothing. Or, at most, I don't owe you an explanation. That sentence, spoken calmly and without anger, is one of the most psychologically powerful things you can say to another human being. It resets the dynamic instantly because it communicates something they're not prepared for, that you're not playing by their rules anymore. Drop this affirmation in the comments. My worth isn't debatable. Number 3. Master the economy of your attention. Your attention is the most valuable currency you own. Not your money, not your time, your attention. Because wherever your attention goes, your energy follows. And wherever your energy goes, your life takes shape. And right now, most of you are bankrupt. Not financially, attentionally. You're spending your focus on people who don't deserve it, arguments that don't matter, grudges that drain you, social media feeds that numb your brain, and drama that adds absolutely nothing to your life. You are psychologically hemorrhaging, and you don't even realize it, because nobody ever framed attention as a resource that can be wasted. Machiavelli once said, "He who neglects what is done for what ought to be done sooner affects his ruin than his preservation." Read that again. Machiavelli is telling you that obsessing over how things should be instead of dealing with how things are is the fastest path to your own destruction. And that's exactly what happens when you give your attention to things that don't serve your growth. You argue with someone online for an hour. You replay a conversation from 2 weeks ago. You stalk an ex's social media. You obsess over someone who wronged you. And while you're doing all of that, your goals sit untouched. Your potential gathers dust. Your future waits for you to stop investing in your past. Here's what nobody tells you about attention. It operates on the same principles as economics. Scarcity creates value. When your attention is scarce, when people can't easily get it, when you're not constantly available, constantly reacting, constantly engaged in everyone else's narrative, your presence becomes magnetic. People begin to treat your attention like it's valuable because you've demonstrated that it is. But when your attention is cheap, when anyone can get a reaction out of you, when you respond to every provocation, every text, every piece of bait thrown your way, you've flooded the market. You've made yourself common, and nothing common is ever valued. Let me give you a real scenario. There's a person in your life, maybe a coworker, maybe a friend, maybe an ex who constantly pulls you into conflict. They say something provocative, they twist your words, they stir up drama and then step back to watch you react. And every single time, you take the bait. You respond. You engage. You give them exactly what they wanted. Your attention, your emotional energy, your time spent thinking about them instead of building yourself. They're living rent-free in your head, and they didn't even have to pay a deposit. The most powerful response you can give to someone who's trying to control your attention is to redirect it somewhere else entirely. Not anger, not a clever comeback, Absolute indifference. That's the psychological equivalent of removing someone from your economy. And when you do, something remarkable happens. They escalate, they push harder, they try different tactics. And that escalation is proof, undeniable proof that your attention was the prize they were after all along. The moment you withdraw it, they lose control. That's power. Real, measurable, psychological power. This applies to more than just people. It applies to content you consume, habits you maintain, environments you stay in. Every single thing that touches your attention is either building you or draining you. There is no neutral ground. Start conducting an audit of your attention the way a CEO audits a budget. Where is it going? What's the return? And if something is consistently costing you energy without producing growth, cut the budget. Ruthlessly. Drop this affirmation in the comments. My attention is gold. Number 4. Make your calmness terrifying. Most people think power is loud. They think it's aggression, confrontation, raised voices, and intimidation. That's not power. That's panic wearing a costume. Real power, the kind that makes people deeply, fundamentally uncomfortable, is silent. It's composed. It's a person who should be angry, but isn't. It's a person who has every right to explode, but instead looks you dead in the eye with absolute stillness. That's the kind of power that rewires the dynamic of any room you're in, because it's the kind of power that nobody can predict or defend against. Machiavelli once said, "The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves." One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps and a lion to frighten wolves. What Machiavelli is describing is dual intelligence, the ability to combine cunning awareness with commanding presence. And nothing communicates both simultaneously, like a person who remains devastatingly calm when every expectation says they should be falling apart. There's a reason this works, and it's rooted in deep psychological mechanics. When someone provokes you, they've created a script in their head for how the interaction is going to go. They've predicted your anger, your defense, your emotional reaction. Their entire strategy is built around your predictability. But when you don't react, when you stay calm, composed, and controlled, their script falls apart. They've rehearsed for a storm, and you've given them silence. Psychologically, that creates what's known as an expectation violation, and expectation violations are profoundly disorienting. The other person doesn't know what you're thinking, what you're planning, what you're going to do next. And that uncertainty is far more intimidating than any outburst you could produce. Let me show you what this looks like. You're in a meeting, and someone undermines you publicly. They make a comment designed to diminish you in front of others. Everyone turns to you, waiting for a reaction. The old you, the reactive version, would have fired back immediately, defensive, emotional, visibly rattled. And even if your comeback was sharp, the damage would be done because everyone just watched you lose your composure. The audience doesn't remember who won the argument. They remember who lost control. Now, imagine the new version of you. Someone throws that same comment. You pause. You hold eye contact for 1 second longer than is comfortable. You let the silence land. Then, calmly, without a trace of emotion, you say something measured, precise, and devastating. Or you say nothing at all. You simply move on. The room notices. Everyone notices. Because what you've just communicated without saying a word is that this person doesn't have the power to move you. And that realization lands harder than any words you could have spoken. Here's the deeper mechanism. When you react emotionally, you're operating from your amygdala, the brain's fear and threat center. It's fast, it's instinctive, and it's almost always wrong. When you pause and respond with calm, you're operating from your prefrontal cortex, the center of logic, strategy, and long-term thinking. The people who consistently win in life aren't the ones who react faster. They're the ones who respond smarter. Calm isn't passive. Calm is calculated. Calm means you've already processed what they said, already decided how much power to give it, which is none, and already moved on to the outcome that actually matters. Start training this. The next time someone provokes you, before you respond, take one breath. Just one. In that single breath, ask yourself, does this person deserve my emotional energy? 90% of the time, the answer is no. And that breath is the difference between being controlled and being in control. Drop this affirmation in the comments. My calmness is my power. Number 5. Stop treating loyalty as a permanent trait. This lesson will probably hurt the most because it forces you to confront something you've been avoiding. The people you're loyal to are not all loyal to you, not because they're necessarily evil, but because loyalty, in the minds of most people, is conditional. It lasts exactly as long as you're useful. The moment you stop being convenient, the moment you need something back, the moment your presence becomes complicated rather than comfortable, watch how fast the word loyalty disappears from their vocabulary. Machiavelli wrote something that sounds cruel until you've lived it. He said, "Men are ungrateful, fickle, false, cowardly, and covetous." Now, before you dismiss that as cynicism, think about your own experience. Think about the friend who swore they'd always have your back and then went silent when you were at your lowest. Think about the partner who said, "forever," and then rewrote history to justify leaving. Think about the co-worker who took credit for your work and then acted confused when confronted. Machiavelli wasn't being pessimistic. He was being observational. He was describing default human behavior, not the behavior of bad people, but the behavior of most people when their self-interest is threatened. Here's the mistake most intelligent people make. They give loyalty in advance, as a deposit, expecting it to be returned in equal measure. But loyalty doesn't work like a savings account. There's no guaranteed return. There's no contractual obligation. What you deposit emotionally, the other person is free to spend however they want. And when you've given your loyalty to someone who never earned it, you don't just lose the investment, you lose a piece of yourself. You become cynical, guarded, bitter. Not because the world is inherently cruel, but because you handed out trust like it was free, and it isn't. The strategically intelligent person operates differently. They observe before they invest. They let people demonstrate loyalty through repeated, consistent action, not words. Words are easy. Anyone can say, "I've got your back." The question is, have they ever had your back when it cost them something? Have they defended you when you weren't in the room? Have they chosen you over their own convenience? If the answer is no, then what you have is not loyalty, it's proximity. And proximity without proven character is one of the most dangerous illusions in human interaction. Here's the practical shift. Stop grading people on what they say and start grading them on what they do when it's inconvenient to follow through. Create a mental hierarchy. There are people who've earned your trust through fire. They stayed when it was hard. They showed up when it cost them. They protected you when you couldn't protect yourself. Those people get your loyalty. Everyone else gets polite distance, not cruelty, not suspicion, just measured engagement. You don't need to announce this reclassification. You just need to act on it, quietly, consistently, strategically. This isn't about becoming paranoid. It's about becoming precise. A general doesn't send all his troops to every front. He positions them based on intelligence. You should treat your loyalty the same way as a strategic asset that goes where it's earned, not where it's demanded. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I trust strategy, not sympathy. Number 6. Turn your pain into an empire. Let me tell you something that every powerful person knows and almost nobody talks about. Pain is not the opposite of success. pain is the raw material of it. Every setback you've experienced, every betrayal that gutted you, every failure that made you question your own worth, those aren't obstacles, they're construction materials, but only if you know how to use them. Most people let pain break them down. The strategically brilliant let pain build them up. Same fire, different outcome. The difference isn't the temperature of the flame, it's the composition of the metal. Machiavelli once said, "Never was anything great achieved without danger." And I want you to sit with that for a moment, because embedded in that quote is a truth that most self-help will never tell you. Greatness doesn't come from comfort. It comes from crisis. It comes from being pushed to the edge of what you thought you could survive and discovering that you're still standing. The most dangerous, the most capable, the most psychologically resilient people on this planet aren't the ones who avoided suffering. They're the ones who metabolized it. They took the worst thing that ever happened to them and they alchemized it into fuel. There's a psychological concept called post-traumatic growth. Most people have heard of post-traumatic stress, but fewer know about its counterpart. Post-traumatic growth is the documented phenomenon where individuals who endure significant adversity don't just recover, they surpass their previous baseline of functioning. They develop deeper relationships, greater personal strength, a renewed appreciation for life, and an expanded sense of possibility. The suffering didn't diminish them, it expanded them. But this doesn't happen automatically. It happens when you choose to extract the lesson from the wound, rather than just nursing the wound itself. Here's what this looks like in the real world. You lose everything. A business fails. A relationship ends. Your reputation takes a hit. And in that dark moment, you have two paths. Path one, you become a victim. You retell the story of what happened to you over and over. You use your pain as an identity. You become defined by the thing that broke you. Path two, you become a strategist. You analyze what went wrong. You identify the weakness in yourself that allowed it to happen. You rebuild from the ground up with better materials, better boundaries, and a mind that has been tempered by fire. The old you would have sat in that pain for months, maybe years, replaying, regretting, wondering what if. The new you takes 72 hours to feel it fully, because denying pain is not strength, it's avoidance. And then you stand up, dust yourself off, and build something that makes the old version of your life look like a rough draft. Every empire was built on ruins. Every success story has a chapter the author doesn't like to talk about. The difference between the person who's crushed by pain and the person who's constructed by it isn't talent, it isn't luck. It's a decision, a conscious, deliberate decision to refuse to let the worst moment of your life be the last chapter of your story. Drop this affirmation in the comments. My pain builds power. Number 7. Control the narrative or someone else will. Here's something that will change how you see the world forever. Reality is negotiable, not physical reality. Gravity doesn't care about your opinion, but social reality, the reality of how people perceive you, how situations are interpreted, how your story is told, that is entirely up for grabs. And if you're not actively shaping that narrative, I promise you someone else is shaping it for you, and they won't be kind about it. Machiavelli understood this at a level that was centuries ahead of his time. He wrote, "Men are so simple and so much creatures of habit that he who seeks to deceive will always find someone who will allow himself to be deceived." Now, I'm not telling you to deceive anyone. What I'm telling you is to understand the mechanism. People don't process raw reality. They process stories, narratives, frameworks. The way you frame a situation determines how people experience it. The person who controls the frame controls the outcome. This is perception management, and it's not manipulation, it's communication at its most strategic level. Let me give you an example that will make this crystal clear. Two people leave a job. Person one tells everyone, "I got fired. They didn't appreciate me. I'm devastated." Person two tells everyone, "I've been planning a transition for months. The timing aligned and I'm moving towards something bigger." Same event, radically different narratives. And here's the key: both narratives might be equally true or equally incomplete. But the person who controls how the story is told controls how people feel about it, how they respond, and what opportunities follow. This is happening around you every single day. In every workplace conflict, in every breakup, in every friendship fallout, there are competing narratives. And the person who gets their version out first, who tells it more convincingly, who frames it with more emotional precision, that person wins the perception war. Fair? Not always. Real? Absolutely. Now, this doesn't mean you should lie. Lies are fragile. They require maintenance. They collapse under pressure. What it means is that you should be intentional about how you present yourself and your story. When you share a failure, frame it as a lesson. When you share a setback, frame it as a redirect. When someone tries to paint you as a villain, don't panic, don't over-explain, offer a better story. Not a fabricated one, a strategically accurate one that includes the context they conveniently left out. The psychological principle at work here is called framing effect. Research has shown repeatedly that the way information is presented dramatically influences how people evaluate it. The same data, framed differently, produces opposite conclusions. This is why politicians, lawyers, marketers, and leaders obsess over framing. They understand that reality isn't objective in social contexts, it's constructed, and the architect of that construction holds the power. Most people are passive about their narrative. They assume the truth will speak for itself. It won't. The truth is raw material. It requires shaping, context, and delivery. You are the narrator of your own life. If you don't write the script, someone else will. And their version will always serve their interests, not yours. Here's the practical takeaway. Before you enter any important conversation, any negotiation, any conflict, ask yourself, what is the narrative I want to establish? Then build every word, every pause, every piece of evidence around that frame. You're not lying, you're curating. The same way an architect doesn't use every available material, they select the right ones to create the right structure. You're doing the same thing with information. That's not dishonesty, that's intelligence. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I control my image. Number 8. Become the person they can't afford to lose. This is the final lesson, and it's the one that ties everything together. All the silence, all the emotional mastery, all the strategic thinking, it all converges on one ultimate principle. Make yourself irreplaceable, not in a desperate, people-pleasing, I'll do anything so you don't leave me kind of way. In a cold, calculated, value-driven way. Become so good at what you do, so essential to the systems you're part of, so difficult to replicate that the thought of losing you keeps people up at night. Machiavelli said, "The best fortress is to be found in the love of the people." And that quote might surprise you given everything else we've discussed. But Machiavelli wasn't being sentimental. He was being strategic. The strongest position you can occupy isn't one where people fear you, it's one where they genuinely cannot function without you. Fear creates compliance. Indispensability creates devotion. Fear makes people obey when you're watching. Indispensability makes people protect you when you're not in the room. Here's the mechanism. In any relationship, professional, personal, social, there's an invisible ledger of value. Every interaction is either a deposit or a withdrawal. The person who consistently deposits more value than they withdraw holds the power. Not because they're manipulating anyone, but because human psychology is wired to protect what it values. We don't discard what we can't replace. We don't disrespect what we depend on. We don't betray what makes our lives demonstrably better. Now here's where most people go wrong. They try to become indispensable through sacrifice. They overextend. They say yes to everything. They make themselves available 24/7. They confuse being needed with being used. That's not indispensability, that's dependency. And there's a critical difference. A person who is indispensable holds power because they bring unique, difficult to replicate value. A person who is dependent gives away power because they've made their worth contingent on someone else's approval. One is strategic positioning. The other is self-abandonment dressed up as dedication. The way you become genuinely irreplaceable is threefold. First, you develop skills and knowledge that are rare. Not just competent rare. In a world where everyone has access to the same information, depth is the differentiator. The person who goes deeper, who masters while others dabble, who puts in the hours that nobody wants to talk about, that person becomes a category of one. Second, you become the person who solves problems others can't or won't. In every organization, every social group, every relationship, there are problems that everyone sees but nobody addresses. The person who steps into that gap doesn't just add value, they become the value. Third, you maintain your standards even when it's costly. This is counterintuitive, but hear me. The person who is willing to walk away is always more valued than the person who clings. Your willingness to leave to say, "I deserve better and I'm prepared to go find it," paradoxically makes people fight harder to keep you. That's the scarcity principle in its purest form. What's rare is valued. What's abundant is taken for granted. Make your presence something that cannot be taken for granted. Here's what this looks like in practice. You're at a company and you've spent the last year quietly becoming the person who understands the systems nobody else bothered to learn. You've built relationships across departments. You've documented processes, solved recurring problems, and positioned yourself as the bridge between teams that don't communicate well. Now, when restructuring conversations happen, your name doesn't come up on the chopping block. Not because you played politics, not because you kissed up to leadership, but because removing you would create a hole that nobody else can fill. That's not luck, that's architecture. You built that position brick by brick, and now it protects you like a fortress. Apply this to every area of your life. In friendships, be the person who brings wisdom, stability, and genuine value to the table, not just entertainment and availability. In relationships, be the partner who has their own life, their own ambitions, their own gravity, not someone whose entire identity orbits around another person. In your career, be the person whose departure would cause a measurable disruption, not just another replaceable part in the machine. Machiavelli also said, "He who is not master of himself will always be a servant of others." That quote is the foundation of everything I've told you today. Before you can become irreplaceable to others, you must first become indispensable to yourself. Master your emotions, master your skills, master your response to pain, to betrayal, to the unfairness of the world. Because a person who has mastered themselves cannot be mastered by anyone else. That's not arrogance, that's sovereignty, mental sovereignty. And it is the rarest, most powerful form of intelligence on this planet. Drop this affirmation in the comments. My presence commands respect. Let's take a step back and look at what you've just absorbed. You've learned to stop announcing your moves, to treat your plans like classified intelligence, and let results speak louder than intentions. You've discovered that the need to be understood is a chain, not a virtue, and that true freedom comes from being at peace with being misunderstood. You've mastered the economics of attention and learned that where your focus goes, your life follows. You've learned that calmness isn't weakness, It's the most terrifying weapon in any room. You've confronted the uncomfortable truth about loyalty, and you now know how to invest it wisely instead of wasting it freely. You've learned to alchemize pain into raw building material instead of letting it define you. You've understood that narratives are constructed, not discovered, and that the person who controls the story controls the outcome. And finally, you've learned the ultimate principle becomes so valuable that losing you is something they can't afford. 8 lessons. Every single one drawn from the same brutal, unflinching philosophy that one exiled Italian wrote 500 years ago in a cold room with nothing left to lose. And here you are, absorbing the same truths, applying them to a world that hasn't changed nearly as much as we pretend it has. You started this video as one person. Maybe you were frustrated. Maybe you were confused about why the world seemed to reward the wrong people. Maybe you were tired of being the person who gives and gives and gives and gets nothing in return. But right now, in this moment, something has shifted. You can feel it. A clarity that wasn't there an hour ago. A firmness in your chest that says, I'm done being the person who gets played. You are no longer the person who shares their strategy with everyone. You are no longer the person who chases understanding from people who were never going to give it. You are no longer the person who wastes their attention on things that don't build their future. You are no longer the person whose emotions can be weaponized against them. You are the person who sees the game, the person who moves with awareness, the person who turns pain into architecture and silence into strategy. Now let me warn you, the world is going to test you on every single lesson you just learned. It will happen fast. Someone will provoke you and expect the old reaction. Someone will demand an explanation you don't owe them. Someone will try to pull you back into the patterns you just decided to break. Your old programming will try to seduce you. It will whisper that it's easier to be the nice one, the agreeable one, the one who explains and apologizes and keeps the peace at the cost of their own soul. Do not listen. Stand firm. You didn't spend this time to go back to who you were. You've seen too much. You know too much. The person you were before this video cannot contain the person you're becoming. Let the old version go. They served their purpose. They got you here, but they can't take you where you're going. Drop this final affirmation in the comments. This is the one that matters the most. The one I want you to carry with you into every room, every conversation, every challenge, every silent moment when the world tries to shrink you back down to size. I am untouchable. If this video changed how you think, if something in here hit different, hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. You probably have someone in mind already. Subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss another lesson. And remember this, the most dangerous person in any room is not the loudest, not the strongest, and not the most aggressive. It's the one they can't read, can't rattle, and can't replace. That person is you now.